Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. Howdy, y'all. It is another wonderful, beautiful Jum'ah, alhamdulillah, one of the days of Islam, and it is the best day on which the sun has set, the day that Adam alayhi salam was created, the day that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved Musa, the day that many other things amazing happen in Islam, and also the day that the day of judgment will be established and the horn will be blown. So it's a beautiful Jummah. Don't forget to make salatu wasalam ala nabi, to make salutations and send blessings upon the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, because the reward is 10 times than it usually is. And also, let's try to increase in our Quran, read Surah Kaf, and remember Allah much, for verily our dua in the last part of the day, inshallah, is accepted bi'idhnillah. Without further ado, we have a wonderful program today, mashallah, with somebody who's been with us before, podcasting with Islam Chat. Today, alhamdulillah, I've got him on my channel, and I'm really, really excited about this, because this topic in our statistics that we run for our organization on what are the most searched terms, ever since COVID, the most searched term is purpose of life, or what is my meaning? Do I have meaning? And I think that's really pertinent. And it's something that we can never talk about it too much, because there's always going to be people who still don't know that there actually is a purpose to their life. And so I have a wonderful guest with me today, Allahumma barak, Sheikh Imran Hussein, Ustadh Imran Hussein, who will be giving us a little bit of his understanding of the purpose of life from Islam and the Sharia, and to help hit that part of the hearts that really need to hear it. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brother. How are you doing?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Good. Alhamdulillah. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. MashaAllah. You know, it's Medina is a place that you're hard pressed not to be doing all right. Alhamdulillah.
Mashallah. Yeah, I mean, it's a blessed place, and it's all of us yearn to be there more often, but we can't. And if you're there, what a blessing. May Allah, lengthen it for you, inshallah, and keep you there, inshallah.
I mean, and if you ever want to come, I say this to everybody, if you do come, we have an extra bedroom. When you're in Medina, when you're in Mecca, I can't help you. But if you're in Medina, don't worry about a hotel. I will cook for you. I'll take you around, whatever you need, drive you, all that kind of stuff. So you'll be taken care of.
Inshallah, may Allah bless you, bro. Jazakallah khair.
Wayak, man.
Sorry, bro.
That's all good.
Just sort this out. Yeah, okay, alhamdulillah. So yeah, bro, Jazakallah khair for the intro. I think the topic itself is very important.
Did you freeze up?
It was very interesting, subhanAllah. And yeah, I mean, it's a big question, bro. The way I see it is, it's probably the biggest crisis that the West is experiencing today is the crisis of meaning. People don't know what the meaning of life is, why they exist. I mean, if you look at it materially, everyone has everything, more than people have had throughout history, and more than people have even today in certain other parts of the world. Yet something is missing. People are looking, people are searching, and in the attempt to find answers, we see people going all over the place. Adopting new age spiritualities, creating and concocting new religions. Doing all sorts of craziness, subhanAllah. So I think it's a very important topic, mashallah, that we're touching upon today.
No, I agree, and even within Muslims, I think a lot of Muslims have gone lost because they don't have that purpose, right? They might be culturally Muslim. They might have so little knowledge that they don't realize that their purpose is so much higher than maybe the things that they're already doing. And so if you give somebody some tasks and no purpose, right, even just statistically, talking psychologically speaking, that person is not going to be as motivated. They're not going to go as far as someone who, you actually give them a purpose and those same tasks, right? And so I think this is something that it's a really beautiful gift that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, right?
Absolutely, man. Yeah, absolutely, bro. And like you said, the problem isn't only there for the non-Muslims, about purpose. It's Muslims, especially young Muslims today. A lot of them are struggling with this. they're Muslim, by name, by religion, by being born into a particular family, but they don't still know. They're as lost as anyone else out there in regards to, why do I exist? What's the purpose of my life? And that's another important thing I guess we can discuss as well, is that, it's one thing to know your purpose, but it's a whole other thing to act upon it or live by it. If you know the purpose of life, Allah's told you it, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, that He did not create us for any other reason except to worship Him. And if you don't act upon it, well, you probably will be in a worse position than someone that's completely clueless and doesn't even know about Islam in many ways. Because you know the truth now, you know why you exist, you know why you live, but you're not doing anything about it. And that's a big problem in and of itself. And I call it, it's Muslim nihilism. It's a type of nihilism or meaninglessness that Muslims are unfortunately experiencing today, when we have the answers, we have clarity. Allah's given it to us, on a silver plate, if you like. It's all there for us. It's just we have turned away from this reality. So yeah, I mean, I guess one of the things we can also touch upon is this, what is life like in the absence of Allah? So where does someone go to seek meaning and purpose without God, right? This is very important as well, bro, because I guess even before that, one of the things we could talk about is, or recognize, is that to search for meaning, to search for purpose, is something very, very natural for human beings, right? It's innate, it's fitri. We need to look for answers. When we make things in this world, like designers, when they design things, they design it with things with purpose. When we do science, so we try to study the world, we try to understand the meaning and purpose behind the things that we're looking at and that we're studying. When we use language, it's used because we know words contain meaning, right? So there is a meaning behind what we say as well. We function as humans through the lens of meaning, right? From waking up in the morning, to brushing your teeth, to having breakfast, to having, leaving for work, working, coming home, sleeping at a certain time, all of it's done for a reason. Every choice we make has a reason behind it. There is a meaning behind it. So we can't do without meaning as human beings. We can't do without purpose. Now, here's where it gets interesting, is that at some point, when we are looking for the purpose behind everything, that question turns in on ourselves. Well, why do I exist? What's my purpose, right? Everything I'm wearing, everything I have in my house, everything I can see around me has a purpose, has meaning. But what about my own life? What about my existence? And I think at that point, if you don't have Allah, if you don't have Islam, it's gonna be a bumpy ride. Basically, it's gonna be a very, very bumpy ride after that. So I guess that's a good place to start. Is to recognize that we need purpose, we need meaning. It's not a trivial thing. It's not luxury. It's not luxury. Everything is good now. Let me see if I can find engage this question of purpose for a while. No, it's a necessity for the human being. And in the absence of Allah, there are no answers, bro. There are literally no answers. In the absence of God, what could you do? You can either become a nihilist, you can say there is no meaning to life and that's it. And that's not going to work well for you, because you're going to be in a constant struggle inside, because you want purpose, there has to be purpose, but you're at the same time saying that there is no purpose or meaning. So you're going to have this dissonance, as they say, cognitive dissonance within you. If it's not that, then you become a hedonist. You say, oh, forget that, there is no purpose, but I'm going to take it a step further. I'm just going to enjoy myself. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to do the things that bring me pleasure. Do the things that fulfill me, even if it's in the short term. So you'll do what the hedonist does today, which is just go out and do all of the things you can to seek pleasure. And again, that doesn't work too well for people, in the long run, because most things in today's society which give us pleasure are also things that lead to a lot of pain and suffering in the long term, whether it's drugs, alcohol, whatever it is. Most of these things, they always have a bad end, right? And I mean, even if you bypass all of those negative effects, how long are you going to do it for? When you get old, most of those things aren't going to apply to you. You're not going to be able to do those things anymore. So what are you going to do then, right? So that's another problem. If you don't do that, and if you want to be a bit more sort of, I guess, morally upright, you may take the road of the existentialist, and you may say, okay, there is no meaning or purpose to life, but you know what? I'm going to create my own purpose. I'm going to make meaning for myself, right? I'm going to give myself this noble goal, whatever it is, and I'm going to strive after that. But even if you go down that route, eventually you come to the point where you realize, well, anything I've told myself, say I say to myself, my objective or my goal is to build a hospital, or to do charity work, right? Or to volunteer, whatever it is. At some point, you're going to be like, okay, I've just told myself that. There is no objective truth to these things. It's just something I've made up. It's something I've just told myself is my purpose, but I've just made it up. It's like children when they play dress up. You know, they become doctors and engineers and nurses, whatever
Right.
the case is. You're just making it up. And if that's the case, well, another thing that comes into play here is, well, what is easy for the human to do? Something that's good, or something that's bad? Normally it's things that are bad, or things that fulfill our desires. You know, it's easier to be lazy. It's easier not to do something. It's easier to, do things which may be selfish, as opposed to doing things that are selfless. So if you don't have anything that grounds all of this, your ideas, well, then eventually you're going to be like, why am I pushing myself and struggling so hard to do this so-called good thing, when I've just made it up? I rather just, chill out and just do nothing, or do something that brings me pleasure and it's easy. So that's not gonna, take you far, this approach either. So at the end of the day, you're just left spinning your wheels in the absence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the absence of Islam particularly. And it's a dark place, bro. It's a very, very dark place, subhanAllah.
I even recently heard that there were basically, whenever we are fulfilled in doing like any kind of these tasks as we go along the way, depending on the way that we think about these things and how we're doing it, how like our dopamine's released, right? So like whenever you fulfill a goal that you've been working on, dopamine is released, and that makes you feel good, and serotonin uptake as well. And so I think, you can easily say that, yeah, missing these kind of things, then you're not going to have that same release. So you're not even going to feel the same. So that's why people, would you say, are feeling depressed? Because they're just doing things because they feel like that's what they have to. This is just part of what they see other people doing, but they're not finding that purpose in it.
Absolutely. Depression and anxiety, certain forms of depression and anxiety definitely arise from this sort of existential crisis, when people can't find meaning. Sure, there's many other reasons people may fall into depression or anxiety, but there definitely is an existential element to it as well for many people. And like we said, purpose and meaning is so important, bro, for the person, that when you can't find it, or if you have to conclude that there is no meaning or purpose to life, that's a very depressing proposition, and it will lead to anxiety and depression, bro, no doubt.
SubhanAllah. So how do we teach people how do we show? I mean, we can show them, but how do we make it really clear to them that here's a purpose, and then we can talk about implementing it later.
Yeah. So the first thing is, if you look at it from the perspective of non-Muslims in particular, but even Muslims that are lost, is a good idea to get people to realize that without Allah, without God, without revelation, there is no ultimate meaning or purpose to life. That's the very first thing. For most people, you need to get them to realize that there are no other options, right? There are just these plugs which may work temporarily, like we mentioned, hedonism, materialism, existentialism. They may work temporarily, but they're not going to fulfill you, right? And for some people, everyone's different. For some people, they learn the hard way. They need to just go through the process of trying everything, and then they realize, okay, yeah, there is no alternative. Other people, they're more, they rely more heavily on their sort of ability to reason about these things, and they realize, okay, it makes sense that there is no purpose and meaning to life without God. Now, why is that the case? I think it's important to sort of briefly mention this as well. Why is it the case that without Allah, without God, without revelation from God, that life is ultimately meaningless? So if you assume a universe for a second, that there is no God, there is no creator, what does that mean about the universe, right? What can we conclude in regards to meaning and purpose? Well, if there is no God, if there is no creator, then where did the universe come from? Where did life come from, right? Essentially, all it is just random atoms and molecules that somehow first come into existence, right? Which, without explanation, they somehow come into existence, and then they randomly are just floating around in this sort of quantum field, whatever, are colliding into each other, at random. There is no thought process behind it. There is no intention behind it. There is no consciousness behind it. There is no creator, as we said, behind it. It's just random. And these atoms and molecules are randomly colliding into each other over time, have formed the universe that we live in today. Now, that idea in and of itself is absurd, bro, because how could we explain this ordered universe if there is no creator or God, right? The fact that the universe exists and it is the way it is a clear sign that there must have been a creator. But that point aside, if it's all random, without meaning, without intention, without a creator, then there is no purpose behind it. There is no meaning behind it. It just happened. It's an accident, right? There is no, and if there's no purpose behind the universe, if there's no meaning behind the universe, then there's no meaning or purpose behind the things within the universe. And that includes us, human beings. So we are ultimately, our lives are ultimately meaningless and purposeless, right? So that's the first thing, that we need to get people to understand that without God, without a personal creator, there is no ultimate meaning or purpose to life. That's the bottom line. It's either God or nihilism. There is no two ways about it. Sure, there may be so small things in between that you can try out that may work for the short term, but there is no other way. Ultimately, there's either God or there's nihilism, right? So that's the first step, bro. I think get people to realize that without God, there is no meaning or purpose. Then the next step is, okay, now show them how Islam, because there's many religions, right, out there. And someone may say, okay, fine, you have to believe in a God to have purpose. Well, why don't I just go and believe in Christianity or any other religion for that matter? They also have a concept of God, right? Why Islam? Well, at this point, you can walk people through the idea. Okay, well, if you look at all of these traditions, especially the major ones at least, and you look at what they say in regards to man, life, and the universe, meaning of life, why do we exist in this world, all of these things. One thing you realize is that there is no coherence in the ideas that these religions present. So they may give you an account for the meaning or purpose of life, but then they may fall short in other regards, right? So, for example, take Christianity, for example, right? In current day Christianity, the idea is that, you believe in God, but you also believe in this triune Godhead, and you believe Jesus came and died for your sins, in a nutshell. Now, therefore, that means that your existence in this world, all you're doing is you're waiting to die, because once you've acknowledged Jesus as coming and dying for your sins, and atoning you, well, then there's nothing else left to do from the perspective of you're good to go, cross over to the other side. And Nietzsche himself mentioned this as well. He attacked the idea of religion providing purpose. He said, look, if you believe in God and you are looking forward to this afterlife now, and you believe that Jesus has died for your sins, and you're clear and you're good to go to paradise, well, then why are you continuing to live? He said that it removes meaning and purpose from life. It doesn't add meaning and purpose to life, because there's nothing to do now, right? You're good. But Islam doesn't have these issues or problems, right? Because Allah has told us He created us to know Him and to worship Him. Where do we get to know Allah and worship Allah? It's in this world, right? So we need this life. How do we worship Allah? We exercise our free will, and we encourage ourselves and try to do good, and we try to stay away from evil. So this is a realm, this is a domain, this worldly life is where we exercise free will. This is where we, try to refine our souls and purify ourselves and to do good deeds so that we can eventually attain paradise, through the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there is a clear objective and role that we have to play in this world, in this worldly life. Allah says in Surah Mulk that He created life and death to test which of us is best in deeds. So that test can only take place within this dunya, in this world. So, so Islam, what it does is that it allows us, or acknowledges that there is a God, but it also tells us what the purpose of living in this world is. It's not just a case of believing and you've got paradise. You have to work, and the work is done in this world. So Islam is comprehensive in this regard. There are no loose ends. It all makes sense. When it comes to suffering, this is another thing many religions struggle with. Well, what's the meaning behind suffering, right? This is another big question. Why do we suffer? The problem of evil. Most religions have a problem with this. In Christianity, again, you had, in the early centuries, you had many philosophers, Christian philosophers, who came about, and they, Aquinas and so on, and they tried to present these detailed philosophies, and they tried to sort of reconcile religion with suffering so they could present a coherent answer. But again, Islam doesn't have to do this. The answers are in the Quran. Allah tells us this life is a test. Tests are not supposed to be easy. That's a good starting point. So there are going to be trials, there are going to be tribulations, there are going to be hardships. Those are the tests. So and there's many other things. For example, we know that trials and tribulations are a means for us to draw closer to Allah. And us drawing closer to Allah is us fulfilling our purpose, which is to know Allah and to worship Him. So tests can be a means to help you, to aid you in fulfilling your purpose, which is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are a means of purification, right? They remove sins. So so Islam not only injects meaning to life, but it injects meaning to suffering, into suffering as well, in a very profound way. So when you go through these things, you see that Islam is comprehensive. It comprehensively allows us to make sense of life, make sense of us human beings, our identity, what this life is all about, this worldly life, and what is happening in the hereafter.
MashaAllah. I don't want to play the devil's advocate, but I do because I'm in dawah. And this is something that I have my own answers, but I want to get your answers for this question because it's actually coming quite a lot recently. And surprisingly, it's coming from sometimes, not always, but sometimes it's even coming from Christians because what's interesting is because you mentioned they already have their own problems with suffering and evil. But what recently a lot of people might say is that, so then therefore God knows ahead of time because we obviously believe Allah is Al-Alim, right? He knows everything. He's Al-Qadir. He wrote everything with the pen before He created it. That's part of our belief in the sixth pillar of Islam, of Iman. And they say, so He already knew we were going to suffer. Isn't that sadistic? That's their question. How would you respond to that?
No, because if we, again, look, so here's one way of answering that question. Look, if we know what the ultimate meaning of life is, the purpose of our existence on this planet is to know our Creator and to worship Him. Okay. Now, if you look at what the secularist or the sort of atheist would say today, what is life all about from their perspective? They have the YOLO mentality. You only live once. It's about having as much as you can, working your way up the economic ladder, making a lot of money, having a lot of material possessions, etc. It's all about progress from their perspective, right? Their perspective is progress, enjoying yourself, having fun. So right off the back, when they come across this idea of suffering or trials and tribulations, that is a problem for them. And it's a problem for them because the objective of their life is progress, material progress. So any suffering, any trial, any tribulation is a barrier between them and progress, right? So they're going to have a problem straight away. But again, from the Islamic perspective, the idea of trials and tribulations or hardships is not something that's necessarily bad or evil, not at all. We know that there's wisdom behind the trials and tribulations that we go through. Allah is Al-Hakim, so there is wisdom behind everything that happens. The story of Musa and Khidr is a brilliant example of this. Khidr, it does things that Musa alayhi salam, in the moment, he doesn't understand. He doesn't know the future outcome of those things. So as any good person would do, he reacts to the things Khidr does. For example, he puts a hole in the boat. And Musa's thinking, these are poor fishermen. You just damaged their boat. They've helped us out, and you just, ruined their livelihood. And at the end, Khidr informs him of the wisdom that Allah had given him about these things. And he highlights to him that, look, if I hadn't damaged the...
I think it froze for just a second, unless that's my internet. I'm not sure, guys.
They fix it up and they're back to business, inshallah. So there's wisdom behind things that happen. So suffering isn't a problem from an Islamic perspective. It may be a predicament, but it's not a problem. And therefore, even if Allah knows and He has determined everything, if we understand suffering and trials and tribulations in the right context, it's not a problem.
MashaAllah. That's that's very important, I think, to kind of point out that one word that you used is wisdom. And I think just that alone is missing from other discourses. They don't see or even think or consider maybe that there could be a wisdom in this quote unquote evil, right? Which at the end of the day for us, evil is very many times subjective. Obviously, Allah tells us what is evil, what is fahisha, what is munkar, things. But for example, someone dying, other people might see that as evil. But for us, okay, well, that person, yeah, they died. Someone came in their house and killed them. But they're one of the people who, in Islam, if they were a believer, they're a martyr. So they're going to actually have something better. So I think another thing too is to talk about that we also don't just see things from this world only either. We see that there's also another dimension to it, like another aspect.
Yeah, absolutely, bro. And this is the thing, it's perspective, isn't it, at the end of the day? Now, from the secular perspective, and when you have this philosophy of worldly progress, any trial, any tribulation, any form of suffering is something bad, naturally, right? But from our perspective, we know this life is temporary, 50, 60, 70 years. The eternal life is coming in the next world, right? So, and we know the objective of being here, which is to work for the hereafter. Now, when you put all of that into consideration, then you understand the role of trials and tribulations. Sure, they're not easy, and may Allah make it easy for all of us. No one enjoys them. Even Muslims don't enjoy suffering and pain. And may Allah, prevent us from going through hard trials and tribulations in this life. But the point is, although they're difficult and hard, they're not pure evil. There is an objective and wisdom behind it. And I always give this example, bro. Okay, we know Allah created us to worship Him. Say your life is all good and you're enjoying yourself, you don't have any trials or tribulations, it's very easy to lose sight of the ultimate goal. You can very easily lose yourself. Say a good life is taking you away from Allah and you're not worshiping Him, right? Now say a trial comes along in your life and it's that trial that takes you back to Allah and you start worshiping Allah again. Now, in the grand scheme of things, that trial is probably the best thing that ever happened to you in your life, because that's now realigned you with your purpose. You're worshipping Allah and you can attain paradise, inshallah, in the hereafter. And if you get to paradise, from there, when you look back, you're going to be like, subhanAllah, that trial was the best thing that ever happened to me. So it's all about perspective. Again, from a secular perspective, they look at the trial and it's evil, it's bad, and that's all it is.
Wow, that's amazing, because that just reminded me, because right now I'm going through a lot of different stories of the ulama of our tradition, of our history of Islam. And if you look at most of the greatest of the ulama, like the biggest names, right, in our history, all the way from the tabi'een until now, right before they became like real, like giants, mashallah, legends, they all had some sort of major trial that happened in their life to put them, either they were already off and then Allah put them back on the right path, or they were never, they were never misguided or anything, but they had something terrible happen to them. And so then they actually decided to become someone who wanted to be a scholar. Like they might not have ever been a scholar, right? And like Fudayl ibn Iyad, right? He was a highway robber, subhanAllah. And then something happened to him that like stopped him in his tracks and made him realize, and he became one of the greatest, ulama of his time. And one of, him and Mujahid became really close friends. I mean, and many other stories. So subhanAllah, like, we can even see this with our own eyes, how trials and tribulations, like the things that I went through, my drinking problems, is what ended up leading me to seeking the truth, that ended up leading me to Allah, guiding me to Islam. So subhanAllah.
Yeah, absolutely, bro. It's I think we've become too soft these days. We're so used to comforts and luxury and ease, and we have such big egos these days, because the ego is the first thing that reacts. When you see people that turn around and say, why did God do this to me? Yeah, why is God doing this to me? God is evil. That reaction is the reaction of the ego, because the ego doesn't like things that bring harm to it or detract from its pleasure. So it's all about, we have huge egos these days. The idea of self-deification is massive these days. You are your own God. You create your own reality, all of these things. So you can see, okay, life is easy. People have become soft. The idea that you are a God yourself, you create your own reality, ego's inflated. Then when a trial comes, immediately, there's a reaction. Oh my God, why is God doing this to me? This is evil. And again, the other thing on top of this is the idea that people think that they can understand the wisdom behind everything. They can't, right? We don't. How many times, bro, I'm sure it's happened to you, it's happened to me many times in my life, and I'm sure it's happened to people listening as well. How many times in our life have we gone through something difficult, and at that moment when we're going through the difficulty, we're like, why in the world is this happening to me? I can't make sense of this. And you can't. We just don't have the ability. But then 6 months later or a year later, you look back, and then you can connect the dots, and you're like, subhanAllah, if that didn't happen to me, I wouldn't be where I am today. It happens to all of us, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same Musa, the story of Musa alayhi salam. It reminds me of that. Musa cannot make sense of why Khidr is doing what he's doing in the moment. It's only after, when he gets the additional pieces of information, that he can connect the dots, right? And that was Musa alayhi salam. Who are we? I mean, we're just regular, people. So sure, there's going to be things that happen to us in our lives and we're not going to be able to make sense of them in the moment. But what do we do in that moment? That's where our trust upon Allah is tested. That's where we have to remind ourselves, it's not my job to make sense of this suffering. Maybe you can, maybe you can't, but it's not my job to understand it fully. My job is to put my trust in Allah, who is all wise, who knows what's happening, who's allowing it to happen, and there is great wisdom behind this, and ultimately there is good in this for me. And that's where that's a test. That is our test, as opposed to, reacting like, someone like Richard Dawkins may react, oh, this is evil, why would this happen, God must be evil. That's a very immature, egotistical, response.
Also, I would say shallow too, wouldn't you think?
Absolutely.
Very shallow. And they claim to be deep thinkers, but it's very shallow.
Yeah, it's a selfish, egocentric, shallow response. That's what it is, bro. Yeah, absolutely. And we need to elevate ourselves as Muslims from these type of responses. And like I said, trials are not easy. We all go through hardships. It's not that you become this sort of Superman or Superwoman and you never feel anything. No, of course you're going to feel. The Prophet ﷺ cried at points, right? The greatest man to ever live. So trials are painful, they're difficult. But we have to do a couple of things. One, remind ourselves that Allah knows best. He is the most wise, and there is good. Ultimately, there's good in this for me, even if I can't see it right now. It's not my job to see it. Allah is Allah. I am a human being. Allah is all-knowing. I am not. Right? So it's to humble ourselves through this knowledge, firstly. And secondly, have patience, practice reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and make dua. And again, if you do these things, what are you doing? You are worshipping Allah. You're drawing closer to Allah. And by doing this, you're fulfilling the purpose of your life, fulfilling the purpose of why you were created. And again, I know it's easier said than done, but this is what we have to try and do, inshallah, and become strong through the whole process as well. It strengthens you. Trials and tribulations strengthen you as a human being.
MashaAllah. Absolutely. So what advice would you give to somebody who they want to, maybe get that purpose, but they don't know if they're 100% that Islam has that purpose yet?
So for me personally, bro, one of the greatest proofs of Islam is the Quran, the coherence of the Quran. The fact that it was revealed over 23 years, and there were no printing presses, no computers, hardly any paper, not even paper. The companions would write on leather and parchment and pieces of bone and so on. And yet 23 years, and you have this volume of text, which is completely coherent from beginning to end, right? So there are no contradictions in it. It's not the case that, in the early revelations, God says he's one, and then in later revelations, there's another concept of God. No, it's coherent throughout with all of its topics. And on top of this, when you assess reality and life through the lens of the Quran, what you see is that the Quran will never say something that doesn't make sense, that doesn't put things into perspective. Like we were saying earlier about why do we exist in this world? Why do we suffer? What is the meaning of it? The Quran puts everything into perspective, and it makes sense. It's coherent. It's very coherent. So I would encourage people to read the Quran. If for someone that's not sure, read the Quran for yourself. And that you will, for most people, if you're sincere and you read the Quran, you will see that this is from the Creator of the heavens and the earth. So that, for me, that's the way forward. Sure, we have some brilliant and profound arguments that our scholars have made throughout history, and mashallah, some of the brothers now in today's era have reintroduced those arguments and so on. And we have some brilliant arguments for the existence of God, etc. But for me personally, I don't think most people even need that. They just need to read the Quran, and they'll see that this is from the Creator.
MashaAllah. That's really good advice. And that's why, guys, I have at the bottom of the screen for anyone who hasn't got a copy of the Quran, non-Muslims who might be watching this at any point, get a free copy of the Quran at get-quran.com, and we'll be happy to send you one. And we can also, talk to anybody who, after you read it, follow up. I'm sure you can get in touch with the guys at Sapiens, and you can also call the phone number in the Quran that we'll send you. So do you have any final things before we go to Q&A? Any final advices or?
So just two quick things for non-Muslims that may be watching. I know there's a lot of misconceptions out there in regards to Islam these days, and I'm sure much of what you've heard about Islam has probably not been positive. And what I would recommend you do is learn about Islam from the correct sources. Now, what do I mean by that? Pick up a copy of the Quran. Like the brother said, you can pick up a copy of the Quran, read it for yourself. Don't let a third party tell you what the Quran is saying. Read it for yourself and see what the Quran says. Right? Everyone, is intelligent enough, and God has given everyone the abilities to understand revelation. Read it for yourself and see what you get from that. And for the Muslims, what I would say is that we need to really start to appreciate what we have been given, which is the Quran. And don't lose yourselves to these new age ideas and philosophies and trends that are out there. You have the best guidance, the only real guidance that you need for life. To live a successful life in this world and in the hereafter. So pick up the Quran and start reading the Quran for yourselves, honestly. And read about, you want a role model, read about the Prophet ﷺ, read about the companions.
Awesome.
Read these things. I mean, read the sayings of the Prophet, peace be upon him. I mean, think, sometimes you're reading the sayings of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and you're thinking, subhanAllah, this was 1400 years ago in a desert, right? It's crazy. The wisdom of the Prophet ﷺ, the intellect, the clarity, the spirituality, it will blow your mind. That's what we need. We need to turn back to the sources, and not only turn back and just read, but to implement. That again is missing. A lot of people won't study. Those that do study, but they don't implement. Implementation is the key. So whatever you read, whatever you learn, try to implement that in your life, inshallah.
MashaAllah. Jazakallah khairah. That's really wonderful. So, guys, we're going to questions and answers. I'm going to start with Shah Nawaz. They're asking, is philosophical argument permissible in Islam?
I won't comment on whether it's permissible or not. So here's what I would say. If you read the Quran, you will find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala presents certain arguments, right? So, for example, in Surah Tur, I believe, chapter 52, verses 35 and 36, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, were they created by nothing? Or were they the creators of themselves? Or did they create the heavens and the earth? But rather, they are not certain. Now, Allah is asking us questions. So this is essentially a logical argument that's been presented to a rational human being that has the ability to go through this process of reasoning and come to the conclusion that Allah created everything, essentially. So sure, there's arguments in the Quran. There's no problem in using arguments. And the best arguments are found in the Quran, right? So, and this is why one of the things I really like about Hamza's book, The Divine Reality, is that every single argument that he's presented and he presents where he got it from, how he links it to the Quran, and where what the link is with the Quran. Where does he get this argument from? Where is this concept or idea mentioned in the Quran? So it's all there in the Quran. I don't see a problem in using arguments in the dawah necessarily, but sometimes sometimes we get carried away with it. Some people do get carried away with it, which is then it all becomes about the argument. And and I've seen this myself. It's just presenting an argument. You get someone to the conclusion that God exists, and you leave them at that. Well, that's not Islam. Islam is not, okay, you acknowledge God exists. It's you acknowledge God exists, you realize He created you to worship Him, and you engage in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the ultimate purpose, goal. Even in the Quran, sure, arguments, you could say, quote unquote, arguments are presented. Very few. But the real objective is to take people from what's fitri, which is that there is a creator, to that He created you to worship Him. So engage in that worship. Don't lose your way, right? So if you use arguments in the da'wah, don't just leave it at that. Supplement that and then really finish it off well by reminding people that God that you now believe in, or that we have come to the conclusion does exist, created you to worship Him. It's not good enough just to say God exists and go your way and live life as you want to live. No, that's not the objective here. So finish it off for people well, inshallah. And in most cases, giving people the Quran, encouraging them to read the Quran is sufficient. Most solid shahadas, bro, from my experience, have come through or are of people that spent time reading the Quran before they accepted Islam. Not through speaking to someone at a table for 10 minutes, receiving an argument for God's existence. And sure, mashallah, that happens too. But the most solid shahadas I've seen over the past decade or so have been people who have actually spent time engaging the Quran prior to taking shahada. So encourage people to read the Quran, inshallah.
Absolutely, mashallah. We got from Sanella. Is he a teacher at university?
I don't teach at university, but I've lectured at universities, and I teach with Sapience and IRA.
Okay, so that's what I mentioned in the comments. I just wanted to clear it because I said yes, but I said he teaches at Sapience and IRA. So I meant to say he teaches there, but he has a lecture. So awesome. Jazakallah khairah. Right. So next question we have from where was it? Oh, this is not a question, but nihilism. You know, you mentioned this is very widespread. Do you think that that's one of the biggest problems in atheism and the secular movement that we have right now?
It's the biggest crisis. Yeah, definitely. Like that's one thing they don't want to touch upon, bro. I mean, I can guarantee it. If you speak to an atheist, they'll love to engage in proof of God's existence, problem of evil. They do all of this stuff. As soon as you ask them, well, what is the ultimate meaning of life on atheism? They don't like that question because they realize there are no answers. So you know, it is definitely, I would say, one of the biggest problems that the West is experiencing, and they're underplaying. They don't want to touch that topic, bro. Because look, I'll be honest with you. Yeah? If you look at the modern Western construct, the system itself, it's designed to promote materialism, right? It's designed to promote a way of life where the person get an education, get a job.
Lost your mic there for a second, partner. It just popped. There was a pop noise and stopped hearing you.
Yeah, 1 second, bro. Just give me a second. I think I know what's going on.
Unless it's my computer. 1 second. Anyone else? Did y'all hear that? Was it my computer or was it his microphone, guys?
Yeah, sorry, I was getting a call on WhatsApp, so I think that's
okay. Let me. That's not a problem.
So yeah, what we were saying, nihilism is definitely a huge problem. You know, the way the system is set, it wants people to function in a specific way, which ultimately makes the rich get even more richer. And you know, you're just cogs. People, they want people to be cogs, like mindless sheep, just functioning within the system, this capitalist system. And they don't want people to ask these deeper questions. That's why if you look at the setup, it's like you do 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Saturday, Sunday, you get off, you know, so you get enough time to go freshen up, get that agitation with the job out of your mind, go drink, go party, you know, lose yourself, this type of hedonism, and then you go back to work again, Monday to Friday, do your shifts again. And we repeat this cycle over and over again throughout our lives. They don't want people to stop and wake up. You know, during the COVID pandemic, what was interesting was that the rates of depression and anxiety shot through the roof. They didn't publicize this too much, right? And there were a lot of help groups that popped up as well to help people that were struggling with this anxiety and depression. But again, they didn't really, you could see sort of billboards on the roads. We were saying, you know, if you need help, you know, you want to speak to someone. And one of the reasons I believe this happened was because what COVID did was it extracted people from their day-to-day living, what they were used to, believing what their life was all about: work, home, party, work, home, party, all of these things. And they were cut off from this. So what did that mean? People had nothing to do but to sit and think. And when they sat down and thought about life, a lot of them, you know, it killed them. It really did. It caused a lot of problems for people. You know, there was an interesting study, bro, a few years ago, I think, where they got a group of businessmen that were really busy, and they got them to sit in a quiet room without their phones or anything. And they couldn't last for a very long period. A lot of them almost went crazy, you know, because people just don't stop and think these days. You know, they don't want you to engage in these bigger questions, and we just don't have time to engage these bigger questions. So yeah, going back to the point, nihilism itself is definitely a problem, but it's being remedied in today's society through materialism and hedonism and all of these types of things.
That's a good point when you say it's being remedied, or at least it's being bandaged, right? There's just
absolutely.
I don't want to post the link for it, but Andrew Tate talked to one of the world's most famous Twitch people. I'm sure you saw it. And
no, I haven't seen it.
Okay, I mean it's the very bad language, But the guy mentioned about how he was talking about like now he's so famous on Twitch, even though he's like a gamer. I mean, he still gets, girls who want him. He's making lots of money, and he made a point. But isn't it so good to just, we won't say what he said, but to just get those things that you want to get, like to fulfill those desires. So it just feels so good to do it. And Andrew Tate, this was right after he became Muslim. He's like the whole of hedonism. He said it's an endless black pit. You can throw a little bit at it. You can throw a lot at it. You can continue to keep throwing stuff in it, and it's never going to be satisfied or filled, right? And you get hungrier the more stuff you throw in it. And then he mentioned, he's like, at the end of the day, you want these women or this other stuff that they don't even care about you. They just want the other things with you. He's like, I want a woman who, when I'm gone, she's going to be making dua for me in the middle of the night. And I was like, subhanAllah, like how powerful, is that?
Yeah, absolutely, bro. It's a brilliant point. And it's just people are struggling, man. They are empty, but they're, like you said, there's bandages or band-aids to keep people going. But they fall off eventually, these band-aids, and then people are back to square one again.
And don't mind plugging yourself on this question. So how can lay people learn to give dawah and be confident and say, I don't know if the topic's beyond their knowledge?
So there's a very good dawah training course at training.ira.org. If you go through that, it will get you started basically, inshallah, in the dawah.
All right, I'm gonna training.ira.org.
Yep.
There you go, guys. For those who are interested in dawah training, right now, Messengers of Peace Academy is not accepting new students. But if when it starts back again, we will put notifications out there for those people who want to also train with us. We have the same teachers, and it's mostly the same curriculum. But both of them are very good, and I'm very happy to support IRA's training because they've done a lot for training, mashallah, good days. So we have Shazan Rahman says, question for Imran or Brandon. I'll let you go because this is, you're my guest. But what's your favorite ayah and surah in the Quran?
SubhanAllah. So my favorite ayah of the Quran is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and do not be like those who forgot Allah, and Allah made them forget themselves. They are the ones that are true transgressors. For me, that's one of my favorite ayahs in the Quran, or one I've been really focusing on a lot because of the whole topic of nihilism and meaninglessness. Because Allah is telling us very clearly that if you turn away from Allah, you'll be in a state where you don't know who you are anymore. You'll lose sense of what you are, who you are, where you're going. You won't know any of these things. And that is the true transgression. And the word nasya that's used in this ayah, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ, the word nasya itself is very interesting because lexically, when you look at it, it's a forgetting, but it's almost a forgetting which is done deliberately. So it's when someone turns away from something, wanting to forget something. And it's very interesting that Allah uses this word because we know from a fitri perspective, the belief in Allah is natural, it's innate. So it takes effort to turn away from the belief in God deliberately. And this has been shown even through the research done by Oliver Petrovich, Justin O'Barrett, that the belief in God is something that's natural. We're hardwired to believe, and it takes effort to turn away. And like we discussed in today's session, that the implications of turning away from Allah is, well, one implication is that you will never find meaning. You'll never find the ultimate purpose of life. The other implications are, well, you won't know who you are, what your true identity is as a human being. Because what do people like? I mean, some people may think, well, how does one forget themselves if they don't believe in God? Because in today's society, most people don't believe in God, but they're taking care of themselves. They go to the gym, they have good diets, they do all of these things. Sure, they're taking care of their physical selves, but they have completely lost the understanding of their true self. Because we're not just a physical being that's walking around. There's the soul, there's the heart, there's the essence of the human being. They've forgotten this. They're completely clueless to this reality, and unless you know these realities, you can't possibly fulfill the purpose of your existence. They don't know why they were created. So it's a very powerful ayah. What's your favorite ayah anyway, Brandon? Be nice to know, inshallah.
I'll give you mine. I want to piggyback off of yours, which is ومن أعرض عن ذكري فإن له معيشة ضنكا ونحشره يوم القيامة أعمى. And whoever turns away from my remembrance, indeed, he will have a depressed life, a miserable life. SubhanAllah. And we will gather him together on the day of judgment completely blind, right? He will be blind on that day, and he will ask why he's blind. And it came in the hadith from the Asbab al-Nuzul, as because that he had eyes to see, and he used it to, and he turned away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in the very next verse, قال ربي لما حشرتني أعمى وقد كنت بصيرا. Like, why, my Lord, why have you raised me blind while I was once seeing? قال كذلك أتتك آياتنا فنسيتها. The word nasiya, right here, it came in. فنسيتها. But it's not you forgot, like, oh, you got busy and this and that. No, you forgot them. You purposely, turned away from them. أعرض, from that verse earlier. You turned away. أعرض عن ذكري. You completely decided to just forget. Like, when people say, forget about it, right? Just like forget about it. And that's where this comes down to. وَكَذَلِكَ الْيَوْمَ تُنْسَى. And thus will you this day be forgotten. And subhanAllah, that's scary, because one of the worst things in the hereafter is to not be able to see our Lord. And this is what that punishment is going to be, subhanAllah. My favorite ayah, because I'm so like dawah focused, is Surah Al-Saf, and it is the ayah هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون. He is the one who sent his messenger and the true religion, the true way, right? So that it would be manifest and raised above all other adyan, all other deens, all other ways of life, worldviews, and would be prominent. It would take over. It's a force that just can't be stopped. Even if the polytheists, those who worship and associate others with Allah, they're not pleased with it. And this is a promise for me whenever I'm giving dawah, that no matter what, it doesn't matter if you see no effect, if things aren't happening the way you want to see them happening, that Allah is He's going to make successful the religion. He's going to make it prevalent, and in the hereafter, for those who are patient, inshallah, we'll have a great reward. So, all right, we're going to have one more, maybe two more questions. I like this one from Mutai Allah. This is a wonderful brother here from the Jamia, so I'm really happy that he's actually here on my channel. I love this brother, for the sake of Allah, mashallah. I haven't known him very long, but he's got one of those good characters. So what's the most effective way to give dawah when the average attention span of an individual in today's society is shot due to social media clips, shorts, TikToks, etc.?
It really depends on where you're conducting your da'wah, I guess. So if it's say you're doing street da'wah, you're out in public, it's always good generally to keep it short because people are busy even then. But if you can get a conversation going with someone, people actually appreciate it, because most people again, we live in a society where everyone knows everything and wants to share everything, but no one wants to listen to someone else. So in your da'wah, if you can take the time with the person, not just give them da'wah, but listen to them and give them time, they'll be willing to give you time. So in that situation, I mean, it's you can spend a little more time explaining things. Online, on social media, it's more tricky. So you would want to, depending on the platforms, I guess you try to give that in a way which would accommodate that. So for example, YouTube, you would expect someone would be willing to watch maybe a video that's maybe 5 to 10 minutes long at least. On TikTok, it's a totally different story, right? So it really depends to what people are exposed to and what they're used to. So it's a good thing to think about these things, definitely. It's a very good thing, because a lot of times we don't think about things before we do da'wah. We just jump in and we don't consider many things. And there's a lot, aside from how you should package your da'wah on these platforms, you should also ask yourself the question, very important question to ask yourself, which most people don't, is what I'm about to do going to benefit the da'wah, or is it going to harm the da'wah? Right now, you may think, well, why would I harm the da'wah? But trust me, a lot of times when you look at the way these platforms are set up and the way the algorithm works, we can easily fall into the trap of just doing something which may work for the algorithm, may get a lot of views, but it may be detrimental for the da'wah, right? Like, and I don't want to get to specific examples, but there's a lot of that out there. So really stop and ask yourself, is this going to help the dawah? Is this going to be detrimental for the dawah? And in many cases, one thing you will notice is that a lot of times what's good for the dawah, even online, may not be what's going to get you the views or going to get you the followers, right? So it's one of those things, because we think these are free platforms. You know, the social media is a free platform, when the reality is behind the curtains, there's a lot going on. There's this algorithm, bro. I call it, it's the modern idol. It's the digital idol, bro. The algorithm. You know, the way it works is it says, look, you feed me through producing the content that I tell you to produce, and I will reward you by giving you the views and subscribers. Right. So it's a very fine line, bro. You know, and brothers and sisters involved online on social media, you have to be extra cognizant of this. Really stop and think about what you're doing, why you're doing it, you know, and don't try not to fall into that trap of, you know, what's going to get the views and subscribers. You know, otherwise it's pointless. You know.
Yeah, and it's all of our deeds will be, all of those deeds at least will be wasted.
Yeah.
I think you kind of already answered this. I don't know if he's asking it in a different way. He says, Brother Imran, how do you explain and approach a narcissist with the Islamic view of purpose in life?
Well, it really depends what the narcissist believes in this case. So if they are, you know, completely infatuated by themselves from the perspective that they're like, yeah, I create my own meaning. You know, I do what I want to do. I don't need a God. I don't need a higher being. Well, you know, in that case, you can try to, again, highlight to them that how creating meaning for yourself is actually lying to yourself, and break that down for them. And then show them that if you really want ultimate meaning and purpose, you know, and you really want to take care of yourself as a narcissist, then, well, it's a good idea to come to Islam, you know, because at the end of the day, Islam is for us human beings. Allah does not benefit from us becoming Muslim or worshipping Him. We are the ones that benefit. You know, we benefit ourselves in this life and in the hereafter. By following the guidance of Allah, we are the ones that are benefiting in this life, you know. So even for a narcissist, I would say, you know, before we correct that psychology, because if it's embedded within them deeply, it's going to take time for them to get over the narcissism. But the starting point is, okay, you really love yourself, you really care for yourself, well, you should become Muslim then, because that's going to teach you how to really love yourself and care for yourself, you know, and want the best for yourself, as opposed to just making things up for yourself.
MashaAllah. That's beautiful advice. That's the last question, guys. I appreciate everybody. Do you have any final words before we wrap this sucker up?
No, Jazakallah khair, bro. May Allah bless you. Keep doing this amazing work, bro. I love your style. I love the content you're putting out, mashallah. You know, keep it up, and may Allah accept from all of us and keep us sincere. And the brothers and sisters watching, inshallah, you know, keep supporting the good work, and get involved in dawah yourself as well. You know, get involved yourselves. You don't have to have a YouTube channel. You don't have to make videos. You know, some people, look at what your skills are. Ask yourself, what are my skills? What has Allah blessed me with? Some people are good at writing, right? I'm terrible at writing. Some people are good at articulating themselves verbally. Some people are good at, you know, planning. Whatever you're good at, look at your skills and then ask yourself, how can I use my skills in the path of Allah? How can I use the skills that Allah has given me for His sake? You know, and use them in the da'wah, inshallah.
Inshallah, barakallah feek. May Allah bless you. If you want to stay around a little bit after we close out, that's fine too. Jazakallah khair, everybody, for those who came and supported us throughout all of this. It's something that after I did my thank you episode the other day, I really continue to, you know, feel it, and I'm just in so much gratitude for everyone who's helped me so far, from my advisors, the people who give me shura, my teachers, my shuyukh, everybody who's been there 100% of the way to, I guess, you know, help make me who I am. And especially, you know, my parents, you know, I really want to keep thanking them, because I guess mom, you mentioned, if you do, I don't know if you're going to watch this because you say you don't want to watch my stuff, but you did mention you watched something the other day. So if you do mention, you know, you do watch this, just know that I thank you for everything. And, you know, part of, you know, Islam is to, you know, have that relationship with our parents and to give thanks. He does not thank Allah who does not thank the people. And so I want to appreciate everyone who came out here today, this evening, depending on what part of the world that you're in. I want to thank Brother Imran, Sheikh Imran, for his time that he's, you know, come out for this, because he's a very busy person. He does a lot of amazing work with IR, and I highly suggest for every single person watching this right now to go sign up for the training. I'm putting it back on the screen again. Please sign up for the training. Also, I want to see if there's anybody who is watching this. My website's almost up, and I need writers. I need writers, like either short essay writers, like blog writers, because I want to put articles up. And, you know, obviously I'll do some what you call sussing out, of people who, I can trust that will write and it's on the same page. But anyone who's interested, go ahead and send me a message on my Instagram, which is linked in my YouTube link tree and all that kind of stuff. So go send me a message if you are interested, and I will love to start talking about, working together to do, things for the website on the side. But without further ado, I don't want to hold everybody up. I've got stuff to go do with my family. It's time for Maghrib as well. So I want to just say Jazakallah khair to everybody, all of those who are non-Muslims, who are still on the fence, thinking about, if Islam is the truth. The best advice that we can give, that Ustadh Imran gave, is that get a copy of the Quran. Go get a copy of the Quran and read it with an open mind and an open heart. Don't be arrogant, and ask God to guide you. Just like I asked Allah to guide me, and a lot of people have done that same thing. And you're going to find that this book is not like any other book. Not only is it preserved, not only does it have no contradictions, but it is something that reaches your heart, and there's nothing like it in the entire world. And that's my daughter who needs me right now. So everybody, I love you so much. May Allah bless you all. May Allah forgive me for anything wrong that I've said. And until next time, y'all take care now. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.